Things are not looking too good for the upcoming Marvel movie Captain America Brave New World, which is set to come out this Friday, because as you can see on Rotten Tomatoes, it only has a 51% aggregate score for critics. Now, keep in mind, this was worse. I believe it was around 48% at its lowest, so it has improved slightly. And also, I'm not one who usually puts a lot of stock in what critics say, and I even maintain that the audience score is really what you need to care about, but still, just coming out of the gate like this, critics that are trashing this movie is not a good sign, but it could be much worse, and I'll get more on that in a moment. But first, let's look at this article I have pulled up here from Forbes. It's talking about the critic reaction to this movie, and I'll give you some more of my input on what I think this could actually mean for the bottom line of this movie. So, for the most part, this article just kind of talks about the movie itself and just kind of the specifics behind it. Now, here's where it's really getting into kind of the meat of everything. Robert Daniels of Roger Ebert Online was brutal in his takedown Captain America Brave New World, writing in his review, "This movie is anything but brave. It is the most feckless, spineless blockbuster of the last decade, a film in need of burning down the old world before daring to look for a new one." William Bidiani of The Wrap isn't a fan of Captain America Brave New World either, calling it a movie without backbone. It's a shamelessly pointless motion picture, one that stumbles into powerful symbolism, but uses those symbols to say as little as possible. In fact, nothing is said, which sadly says it all. Bidiani writes in The Wrap, okay, Rotten Tomatoes critics have collectively given the film a 46%. Okay, so it was at 46%, not 48. And like I said, the score has kind of improved a little bit based on 80 reviews. Let's see, what is it at right now? 117. So it's slightly improved from the time it had 80 reviews to 117. Frank Schneck of The Hollywood Reporter is among the top critics on Rotten Tomatoes, who gives the newest entry in the MCU a rotten review, writing, "Unfortunately, Captain America Brave New World proves a lackluster Marvel entry that feels as if its complicated storyline has been painstakingly worked out without a shred of inspiration." Okay, so you kind of get the idea of what a lot of the critics are saying about this movie. And one of the reasons why I think a lot of critics are giving this movie negative reviews is supposedly in the past, before they did some of the reshoots and rewrites that they had for this movie, it was supposed to be a lot more politically motivated. And what I mean by that is it was supposed to have a lot more on the nose symbolism into current modern day politics and stuff like that. Like I've heard some people even speculate that Red Hulk was supposed to be a Trump allegory and other things like that. And then at one point, Marvel got rid of a lot of the activist producers with the studio and did a bunch of rewrites and reshoots on this movie. And it seems like they're toning down a lot of that rhetoric, and that's something that many critics wouldn't actually like, because audiences aren't really into that sort of thing. Audiences want to watch a movie like this to be entertained, and they don't want to have just a bunch of political symbolism and stuff stuffed into it or whatever and be reminded of current day politics. We've seen plenty of movies fail that are trying to push that sort of thing, and maybe this is one of those movies that was doing that, and they decided to backpedal on that, which is why a lot of these critics are upset about it. So it's possible that this is one of those movies that critics are going to hate, but audiences will love. Some of the reactions I've heard from other critics that are more like YouTubers and things like that is it's not necessarily terrible. It's just kind of middle of the road sort of thing. Not great, not bad. In the kind of in light of other recent Marvel entries, this one kind of stands above all those other things. But will that ultimately matter for the bottom line of this movie? Because reportedly the budget for this was they say it was $180 million. I personally have my doubts about that. Some of the other rumors were saying it was around $350 million. I don't know if that's really the case either. What I do know is $180 million seems kind of low for a movie that had reshoots and rewrites like they did for this one and all the delays. Usually $180 million you'd see for a Marvel movie like this without all those extra stuff added onto it. So I would think this would probably be at least $250 million, but let's assume, just for the sake of argument, that the rumors about the $180 million budget are true and the rumors about the $350+ million budget are not true. What will this mean for the bottom line? Well, fortunately for this movie, The early projections right now are saying domestically it should bring in around $95 million during the holiday weekend. That's the President's Day weekend for North America. You can throw on another $100 million for the global take, which means during this opening weekend, this will bring in a little less than $200 million. So if it had a $180 million budget, that would mean when you factor in marketing, theaters getting their cut, keep in mind internationally, the studio gets less of the box office take. So with all that into consideration, this movie probably needs to make $450, probably $500 million in order for it to be considered a success by the studio. So a nearly $200 million opening weekend is a pretty good start for that. Now, one thing that this movie really needs is good word of mouth. This movie needs to be a movie that if they're not sure about it during its opening weekend, because critics have the power to really hurt a movie during its opening weekend from these early reviews, but after the opening weekend, the audience score is really what matters. So this movie needs good word of mouth. Otherwise, even with the opening weekend like this, I have my doubts that it'll actually make enough money, even if the budget for it was the low rumors that we are hearing about. And the reason I say that is because look at Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanium when that came out. $225.3 million during its opening weekend. That's globally. It's at $106.1 million domestically and $121.3 million from the international box office. But unfortunately for this movie, word of mouth was not good for it. And you can see over here on Box Office Mojo during the following weeks, Friday to Friday, it dropped 82%, 56% following Saturday, 65% the following Sunday. So it had a pretty steep drop off during its second weekend because people were excited to see a Marvel movie. They went out and saw it during its opening weekend, hated the movie, and even though it had a pretty good showing during its opening weekend, the box office take just really nosedived, and you can see it made less than $500 million, and this movie went on to be a colossal failure for the studio. Now, I believe they spent more money on Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanium than what they're reporting that they spent, or what the rumors are saying that they spent on Captain America: Brave New World at the low end. And this was also the biggest box office drop for a Marvel movie. I think it's even still worse than the Marvels, but that's also because Marvel's had a pretty small opening weekend to begin with. So I'm not saying that Captain America: Brave New World is going to have a box office drop quite like we saw with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanium, but one thing is for sure, even if the early projections for the movie are accurate, that's not a sure thing that this movie is going to be successful. What needs to happen is the critics have to be wrong. They have to be basically giving it bad reviews because it's not pushing a political message that they want it to push. And the message that it is pushing, or the lack thereof message, is that it's just a movie that audiences will like. So if the movie is something that critics hate, audiences turn out to disagree with the critics and love, there's really good word of mouth. The projections for the opening weekend are holding strong, or pretty accurate to what they are. There's good word of mouth, and then people show up to watch it during the second, third weeks and give it some legs at the box office. And the early projections for this movie, or at least not the early projections, the rumors about it only having a $180 million budget are actually true. Then this movie could be a success for the studio. There's a lot of ifs in there. I'm not saying that's a long shot or anything like that, but again, having it actually be successful for the studio isn't a sure thing either. But also, when it comes down to it, it really doesn't matter whether the movie made money or not. And I've said this to a lot of people, like, if you like a movie that failed at the box office, so what? It really doesn't matter if the movie you like didn't make money. It's not a reflection on you, or if the movie you like is a bad movie by any objective measurement. It doesn't matter right there. So that's what I'm trying to do here, is just look at it purely objectively, or at least as rationally as possible, thinking whether I just kind of determining whether or not I think this movie can make some money, or if it'll end up being successful. And I think there's a strong possibility that'll be the case, but like I said, it's just not a sure thing, at least not with the information that we have. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Do you think the critics are just absolutely wrong on this one? Or do you think that audience score, when it finally does come out, will be more in line with that? Or at least it'll kind of show that this movie isn't necessarily going to be like a huge one that's going to drive out audiences in the following weeks. comment below and let me know. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.